Hello and welcome to the 17th video that I'll be posting in my Unity platformer tutorial series. And in today's video, we will be discussing about enemies. And we'll be creating an enemy which is a frog. And since our asset has a frog asset, we can create that frog and make it our enemy. Okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you guys to do this as part of a challenge. And that is to create a sprite here named frog. Okay, you don't need to change anything, just make a sprite named frog. So pause the video right now and do the challenge. Okay, so for those of you who successfully did the challenge, good job. And for those of you who don't know how to do it, it's fine. It's actually a matter of 2 clicks, and that is right clicking our hierarchy, go to our 2D objects and clicking on the sprite here, and then name the new sprite our frog. And in our sprite renderer here, I want you guys to put in a sprite which is going to be in our Sunnyland asset. So in our assets, go to Sunnyland, artwork, sprites, enemies, frog, and then go to our idle. And then in our frog here, go to our idle. In our frog, we can drag in frog idle 1. Now, as you can see, we cannot see the frog here. It's somehow in the back. And I want you guys to try to solve this problem by yourself. We've discussed about this multiple times, and let's see if you guys can do this. So I want you guys to try to find out and solve the problem why the frog is in the back or can't be seen. So pause the video right now and do the challenge. Okay, so if you do know how to solve the challenge, good job. That means you've been paying close attention to our sorting layer. But if you don't know how, then it's fine. What you're gonna do is actually in our sorting layer here, we are set to default. And default in our sorting layer is the topmost layer, and that means it'll be rendered first. That means it's at the back. And since yesterday we've already created a sorting layer called entity here, and we can just click on entity, and actually now we can see the frog, but it's so tiny. And I want you guys again to try to solve why it's tiny. I've discussed this multiple times, and try and find out or figure out how to solve the problem. So pause the video right now and try to make the frog its normal size. Okay? So if you know how to do this, good job. You've been paying close attention to our pixels per unit. And if we go into our sprite here, or our image sprite, we can see that our pixels per unit is preset by Unity to 100. And we actually want 16. So if I type in 16 here and click apply, then it should resize to its normal or original size. And since this asset is actually using 16 pixels per unit. And yeah, so if we go back to our frog idle 1 and frog idle 4, select all by clicking frog idle 1, shift frog idle 4, and changing the pixels per unit to 16. Click apply, and they all should have 16 pixels per unit now. And if you go to our frog and go to our jump folder, where there is our frog jump 1 and frog jump 2, I'm going to click on both of these two and select all of them. And then this can be done by going to frog jump 1, shift frog jump 2, and then change this pixels per unit to 16. Okay, now here comes the big challenge. Now I want you guys to try out and make an animation file for idle for our frog, and the idle animation should consist all of these images here, frog idle 1 to frog idle 4. And then I want you guys to make in total 3 animations. First is the frog idle, which will consist of frog idle 1 to frog idle 4. And then in the jump folder, I want you guys to make 2 animations. And those animations are frog jump, which is going to be this animation, and frog fall, which is going to be this animation. This picture here will be frog fall, and this picture here will be frog jump. So pause the video right now and do the challenge, which is to make 3 animations This is frog jump animation, frog fall animation, and frog idle will be this frog idle 1 to frog idle 4. So pause the video right now and make the animation. Okay, so for those of you who do know how to make the animation file, good job. If you don't know how, then this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go to our Windows file, go to the animation section, go to animation or Control 6, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna click on our frog here, so our animation window knows which sprite we want to edit or animate. And then go to our assets folder, and I'm going to create a folder. It's gonna be called frog animation. This is not a necessary step, but I like to keep things organized, so I'm just gonna make a folder so that I know where is our animation for the frog next time we want to edit something. And then go back to our Sunnyland asset, go to our artwork, go to our sprites, enemies, go to our frog, go to our idle, and once again click on our frog here so that our animation window knows which sprite we want to animate. Click on create here, and then it's gonna go in and save in our frog animation, and I'm gonna name this frog idle. Frog idle. And I'm going to drag frog idle 1 to frog idle 4 by going to frog idle 1, shift frog idle 4, drag it in our animation, and I'm gonna space things out 5 frames per second. Or just every 5 seconds I'm going to have an image. Maybe 10. It's gonna be 15. I click play right now. You can see that the frog is animating. But I feel like the frog is animating too fast. And I just like to change this to 7, 14, 21. Now if I click play, yeah, this makes more sense, right? And then I'm going to create another animation, and that is going to be called frog fall, frog jump dot anim. Go to our frog here, go to our jump folder, and drag in frog jump 1. Then when I click play here, you can see the frog changing to the jump animation. And finally add one more clip, and that's going to be called frog fall. Frog fall. And then add in our frog jump section here. And now if we click play, it's going to fall down. Yeah. Okay. So those are the 3 animations. And now if we click on frog, open our animator, we can see that there are 3 animations now. And we can actually close our animation window and just focus on our animator, and then we can resize it to create a triangle so we can see it better or clearly. Frog jump, frog fall, and then, and yeah. Now we can see that there are 3 animations, and we're gonna create some parameters. And the parameters will be a Boolean type this time because we want to make sure that we won't be using enum states. Okay, so in our player yesterday we made using our enum states, but this time we're gonna be using a Boolean, and I'm gonna name this jumping, and I'm gonna create another Boolean called falling, and essentially these are the only 2 parameters that I'll be needing for the meantime. So the reason why I don't want to use an integer again like in our player, which uses enum.states, which is a good method in Animator, but then having an enum state would mean that there are a lot of conditions that you have to make sure and specify them clearly, while using a Boolean is much more easier when it comes to AI bots where they just actually want this condition to happen, then this will happen. And it's much more easier when it comes to programming bots or AI or just enemies that are just patrolling while using Boolean, because they are just true or false statement, and we just want to say if this happens, jumping is false or jumping is true, like that. And I'm going to try to make the connection right now and make transition. So frog idle goes to frog jump, and that will happen when jumping is true and frog jump will go to frog fall when falling is true, and falling will go to idle when jumping and falling is false. Jumping and falling. As you can see, this is much more simple in comparison to our player animation because we are not using enum.states. But in my opinion, enum.states is the best one. And actually, we want to add one more animation before we're finally prepared for our programming, which I'll be discussing in the next video, because I want to teach you guys inheritance and parenting. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to our frog here, go to our scene, and you can see we have one more animation that we have to do, and that is going to be called enemy death effect, because we want to make sure that when the player stomps on the enemy, like in Mario, where when Mario jumps on the enemy dies and he gets a point, something like that. So we're gonna be actually implementing that in our game too, where when the player jumps on the enemy, you get a boost of jump and the enemy will die. So we're gonna make that by going to our enemies here, going to our sprites, going to our effects, and as you can see in enemy death here, there is an explosion. And this will be the effect or animation that will play once the player step on the enemy. So we're gonna create an animation here right now, and we can do this by clicking to our frog, Windows, animation, animation, and then click on this arrow here, create a new clip. I'm gonna name this enemy death effect like this, and then click on enemy death 1 and then click shift enemy death, click on the last enemy death picture, and then I'm going to change this to every 5 seconds. And now if we click play here, we can see that our frog is exploding. And now guess why is this image actually normal size? Well, the reason why is because I've changed the pixels per unit to 16. If it's 100, for example, it's going to still be the normal size here. Apply, go to Windows, gonna go to our animation, go to our frog, go to our enemy death effect and click on play here. It's small, and luckily I've changed it to 16. If we change it back to 16, we click on apply here, we click on play. As you can see, now the death animation is much more larger. And when you are making your own game, actually, you gotta beware of how many pixels per unit are you using for your sprite. And this is usually found when making assets. I'm gonna cover this pixels per unit measurement in my other tutorial videos or as the series progress. Okay, for now, just make sure that this asset is using 16 pixels per unit. And if we go back to our animator here, we actually lack one more thing for our enemy death effect. And I want the enemy death effect to use a new animation or animator parameter, and it's gonna be a trigger. And a trigger is essentially where it only happened once, and it's just actually triggered once. So if it happens and it triggers, then it'll trigger and it can't stop triggering. So that's it. It's just triggered once and only once, and that's it. Okay, so it's basically just a one-time thing. And I'm gonna name this trigger death because that's where actually the enemy is stomped by the player and death happens. And then yeah, and then to make sure that death can happen anytime or like in any state when the frog is actually jumping or falling or idling, I want this to, for example, the frog is just idling and the player stomps on the enemies. I want the frog to die or enemy death effect to play. This means that we're going to use the any state function here, make transition, and go to our enemy death effect, click on the transition here, at the condition, which is gonna be the death. And death here, the condition is nothing, and it's basically just a trigger. So when we type in the code, which is gonna be discussed tomorrow, it's just gonna be like dot trigger, set trigger, and then that's it. It's gonna happen, and directly this will change, and that's it. So let's revise all the programming terms we have for today, and that's actually, we actually did not put any code, and the most coding related part of this video is actually our animator. So I want you guys to understand that we're gonna make a jumping boolean, a falling boolean, and a death trigger. And I think that's it for today. So I hope you guys understand more about Unity platform making, and that's it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And in the next video, I'll be discussing about programming the frog so we can actually patrol. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.